This is a committee meeting, a compensation committee meeting today, being June 29th, 2021. And we call this meeting to order, and we have the first item on the agenda is the Hansen Group to talk with us about our committees, our structure, and we welcome, I'm not sure who it is. Is it?
It's Blair Johansson.
Blair Johansson. Okay, Blair, I'm sorry. I can't read from that far away. I just have the Johansson Group. So thank you and welcome. And Betty, if you would you lead the beginning of the presentation, introduction for the Johansson Group?
Yes. I'm gonna give you a little history. I actually was contacted from the Frankfurt Plant Board with you guys, with the Johansson Group, to participate in their salary information. And
Right.
so that's kind of how I've met Mr. Johansson.
Okay.
And so I started doing some research, and I started talking to him, and I told him that we've been having some challenges with our comp scale and so forth. And so I wanted to see what they had to offer. And so he presented with a presentation, and I thought the committee would be interested in reviewing them.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Johansson, in the room are Squire. We have Squire Sherry Sebastian and Squire Michael Muller, myself, the county judge, Tamber Herod, the deputy judge, and then Betty Joe, our HR. So, and online we have our fire chief and assistant fire chief, Kevin Hutcherson, and Brian Brewer. I'm sorry. I was just Brian Brewer. Okay. So with that being said, we'd like to hear what you all offer, and we would like to end it by asking you several questions too about the program that you've got and some of our issues as well. See whether you can, what your thoughts are on solving those issues.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judge. Sure appreciate the opportunity to present. Thank you, Betty, Joe. What I'll do is just take you through a brief presentation of what we call job evaluation and compensation study, or a process, that we use with both counties, cities, utilities, a lot of different organizations that are both public and private entities. So I'll just go through a brief explanation of the process, and then be able to answer questions. Happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So just to give you a little bit of information on our firm and the business that we're in. We've worked with quite a few organizations since 1973. That's when we started the business. I've got a twin brother. We're both principals in the business. Our dad started the business back in 73 in the human resources area. And then we specialized into job evaluation and compensation back in 1985. Our first client actually was Washington County here in Northwest Arkansas. And we worked with quite a few counties in Arkansas and several cities. We did this process manually for a period of time, and then we computerized it in 2001, 2006 timeframe internally, and then began licensing the process. So what we do is do the process, the job evaluation compensation process, but we use software to make that efficient and use the technology to make that efficient process. We're in about 26 states where we've worked with different clients, but we primarily have our focus in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Missouri area. So in Arkansas, over 50 cities that we've worked with, and then in Oklahoma, about 15 cities and utilities, and then in Missouri and Kentucky. We started moving into Kentucky, and I have a list of some of the clients over the last 6 to 7 years, and then quite a few private organizations where we've worked with both public and private, over 100 organizations. In Kentucky, as Betty Jo mentioned earlier, one of our first clients in the state, Frankfurt Plant Board, and we've worked with them now for about 7-8 years. Owensboro Municipal Utilities, and then Regional Water Resource Agency in Owensboro, and then some power and utility organizations that are listed there. In Arkansas, we've worked with 10 counties, and we've been working with them for about 30 plus years with the county. So we've got a pretty good base of experience working with municipalities, counties, utilities of various types. And then my brother works quite a bit in the private sector working with the banking entities. When an organization considers this type of process, typically what their endpoint is to have a structure, a formalized structure and pay plan that is both internally equitable and externally competitive, so that your ultimate goal is to be able to recruit, retain, and motivate your employees so that they'll continue to provide good services in the community. What are some of the tasks when you formalize the compensation, the job evaluation and compensation process? Typically, we like to work with the organization to answer any initial questions about what are your concerns with your current system and what are you trying to accomplish by moving into a more formal structure, and make sure we understand what are your pain points and what are you trying to deliver with your comp structure. And then part of that process foundationally is to work with your job descriptions and your job valuing based on those job descriptions. Work with the elected officials, the department heads, to make sure that they're comfortable with their job descriptions being current and reflecting what the job entails and what it's supposed to accomplish as part of that process of building the new pay ranges. And then we do the internal job valuing, and then we go to the market and we do an external view of what happens in the marketplace by comparing pay and positions in the marketplace for similar organizations, other counties, municipalities, and private organizations within your labor market to make sure that we're looking at a valid market comparison, organizations that could actually compete with you for like type positions and might be willing to want to recruit folks from your organization. And that's where we're going external. We bring internal and external together and put what we call a structure that we now know internally values your jobs and externally validates the value of your jobs based on market pay. And then we present reports and recommendations and an implementation strategy. If we were to just kind of look at a time frame for the process and the flow, this would be a sample of the project timeline draft. And so let's say if we said today we want to move forward with this process, then as I mentioned earlier, we start with job descriptions to make sure that they're current, and then we transfer those transfer those jobs into the software, where we then go through the process of evaluating each job and placing a job value on the jobs based on 15 compensable factors. This is a system that we developed back in 1985. We've modified it over the years as jobs have changed and technologies changed on jobs, equipment's changed within jobs. And so each job is going against the 15 factors, and we're valuing the job based on the complexity of the job or the lack of complexity and what's expected of the job. So once we do that internal view of the jobs, then we go to the market pay study. So if we were looking at a timeline, we'd look at July for the internal process, July, August timeframe. We go to the market in September, draft and final reports in early October. Just a sample timeline. The 15 factors that we utilize to evaluate each job are listed here. Knowledge and skill requirements with 6 factors, responsibilities for supervision, funds, equipment, and property accuracy and end results. And then your internal, external communications to see what level of communication is required of the job, what's the nature of that communication and the impact, and then machine and computer operations, working conditions, and physical demands. Those 15 factors are evaluated against each job, creating an internal weighted value for each position from the position with the greatest amount of authority, complexity, and responsibility, all the way to the position with the least of the responsibility, complexity of the job. Once we go through that process, then we benchmark the job titles in the marketplace for pay. We also internally evaluate whether or not we have any positions that we think were overstated or understated. So we have some ways to do checks and balances in the process to make sure that when we have a final structure, that you feel good that the position's been properly placed, that the market validates that placement based on market pay. And then going forward, it gives you a structure to evaluate employees' pay within the structure and how they move from, let's say, pay minimum up to midpoint or up to the maximum over time with the county. If we were to look at a chart of a sample county that might be of a similar size, we would look at this, what we call a job valuing summary. And so on this particular chart, we have the sheriff chief deputy up at the top with 2,402 points. This is the first page of about 4-page document working its way to the chief deputy position, all the way to, let's say, a laborer or a custodian being the least amount of points within the job valuing process. And then you can see it moves in a downward fashion based on the position and the 15 factors. What you see here in each of the columns represents a numerical value that's been selected appropriate for that position. And then out to the right is the weighted value that's driving the total points for the position. And this is what we call our internal job valuing process. And this is a particular document that shows the summary of that process. And we would do this for all of your positions internally. Again, this is another opportunity for us to check and balance to make sure that we're not overstating or understating the value of each position. And then we go to the market and do the external and bring it all together for a formalized structure. So that's the process. And this is my last slide, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Excellent. Let me, I'll start off, and then I'm sure everybody's going to have a lot of questions. We basically have a 3-tier operation. We have a road department, which is has their compensation and classifications. And
Right.
we have a fire department, which has a total independent compensation package. And then we
Right.
have our fiscal court staff, which is separate from the fire department totally, and
Okay.
semi-separate from the road department in some ways too. So we're kind of a conglomerate of different types of systems.
All right.
Way we've been set up here. And I know that the chief may want to say something, ask a question, and so John may too, but so you can't compare. There's not a lot. There are some apples to apples, but there's some apples to oranges.
Right.
As we look at the way we've evolved over the years.
Sure. Yeah, and when we work with municipalities and other counties, we'll see a breakout on some of those pay structures. For example, with most municipalities, police and fire have step plans, and they actually have separate pay plans than, let's say, the majority of the non-uniform positions. When we work with the counties, we'll typically see the sheriff's department may have a breakout pay structure, but we have some counties where everybody's grouped together on the same pay structure as opposed to separate structures.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are too. The sheriff is totally different on his own. The county clerk is kind of on their own. The county attorney's on their own, and the jail is on their own. They're all constitutional officers, and they have their own budgets and work in a separate way. I don't know if, as we move forward, or if we move forward and whether they would want to come under this or not. More than likely they wouldn't, Betty.
Correct.
But,
They have their own
yeah,
already
they would
and
have
it's
their own,
working.
but anyway, so the complexity, the more you get into it, the difficulty becomes more evident in
Sure.
trying to work through this process.
Well, we could do the benchmarking for all of those positions with the separate structures just to make sure they're competitive with the market. But internally, for the positions that are what we, let's say, main structure, we would do the internal job valuing and the market comparison to drive that structure.
So that leads to my last question for the moment, and that's market. Define how you determine market value, market pay.
You bet. So it's a combination of both public and private entities where you're competing for labor. So in your particular market, maybe like type or like size counties or municipalities in the recruitment area. Recruitment area typically would be where you're recruiting the majority of your employees. And then if you go outside of that recruitment area, let's say for higher level professional positions or managerial positions, then we go a little bit further out of your immediate market. But typically it's a combination of both public entities and private entities where we're capturing both types of pay, both in the public sector and the private sector.
And you all do that research and make that part of your plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. So typically for Frankfurt Plant Board, we might have 10 to 12 different types of entities, municipalities, utilities, Department of Labor data that we're bringing in to represent the market pay average and mean.
So do you normally find then, once you've done that plan and you come back with based upon the job evaluations and all of that, that entities normally are looking at raising salaries of people as a whole?
A lot of that depends on each organization and whether or not they're staying active with pay and the pay structure, or if the structure's dated and you're not able to increase pay in comparison to the market average. So a lot of it depends on how active you've been in trying to stay competitive in the marketplace. For some organizations, they may be, let's say, either equal to the market or 2 to 3% off the market. We've had some counties where it's been a double-digit percentage that they were off market. Historically, that's getting better over time because organizations are a little bit better about staying current or trying to stay current, as opposed to in the past, we've got our pay structure. Let's just let it be here for about 4 or 5 years without any adjustments, and we'll be okay with making an adjustment 4 or 5 years from now. And that usually gets an organization in trouble if they're letting their structure stay stagnant for that long, for that period of time.
Okay, I've asked enough questions. I'll yield to anyone. Chief, Chief and Brian, I don't see you, so if you'll just speak up if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, we're here, Judge. It sounds interesting to be. I think it'd be extremely beneficial to compare to the market value for our positions.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be too. There's no question, especially we're just right across the river. Yeah, that definitely is the case. Squire Sebastian or Squire Muller, do you all have a question?
Sure, you want to ask any questions?
Your presentation today, do you have that available? I think in our material, I just kind of wanted to see some of the information. Could that be made available to us?
Yes, I'm sure can. I can send it to Betty Jo.
Okay, great. And knowing that our community has an abundance of government type workers, and surrounding communities also feed into that situation. How would your study factor all of that in?
So it's a good question for specifically when we work with Frankfurt Plant Board, given that they're a utility focused service provider, some of their positions would not match up necessarily with some of the state employees that are in the Frankfurt area, but their accounting, their clerical, their computers, computer folks, some of those positions do match up, and that's where we pull some state employee data to help cover some of those positions.
But it looks like for the plant board, for example, they're in between two large communities that have large municipalities. That would be bedroom communities. That would be Louisville, and that would be Lexington. So, how did you factor in market adjustment there? Because cost of living is so much more expensive in those communities.
You bet. So we can tap into some of the utilities as far out as Louisville. Sometimes we'll pull in Owensboro into that study. So we go outside of, let's say, the immediate Frankfurt area to go ahead and look for like type positions in pay and make sure that we're matching them up with other utilities and other positions outside of the immediate market.
And so for a community of our size, would you look at other markets of the same size? Because I'm trying to figure out how you're quantifying like the private market.
Sure.
To the, just trying to get to make sure I understand that.
Right. Okay. So within your area, we might look at contiguous counties in your area to see if there's any counties that you feel like you're competing for labor with those counties. Municipalities within your recruitment area, we want to benchmark with the city of Frankfurt, and depending on whether or not you feel like we need to reach over to Lexington, that would be a discussion to see if we need to tap into that market or not for pay comparisons. So we'd pick up public comparisons, and then on the private sector, we typically pull data from the Department of Labor for your market area. The Department of Labor has it for Frankfurt, Lexington area, and we pull data, and that's in a combination of both public and private entities. Everybody that's reporting labor taxes or providing data to the Department of Labor, and they have a report we can tap into by position title. We also have access to a national database that's indexed to the Frankfurt market. So we would pull comparisons out of that organization. It's called Salary.com Comp Analyst, and we can dial into your market based on that national database where they're pulling data and then using a means to actually drop into your zip code to pick up pay comparisons, and that has both public and private entities. So it's a combination of counties, cities, Department of Labor, and other data that we can capture that would represent your recruitment area. We'd want to have I'm sorry.
I apologize.
Part of the discussion would be to make sure you help us with what you consider to be competing organizations or your market recruitment area, so that we can capture the information that you feel like represents your market.
So USDOL data is available to anyone, and would you be utilizing, I'm assuming you would be utilizing seasonally adjusted data, and then that lags, seasonally adjusted data lags?
Yeah, so the Department of Labor data used to lag 3 years. Now they're 1 year out. So they're getting pretty good about getting closer and closer to the year that we're in. And we've used it now for probably 20 plus years and have found it to be credible data.
Okay. And that is typically, I know at least for private groups, they have to self-report that. And if they are found to report that incorrectly, they can pay stiff federal penalties for that.
It's a really valid data source.
Okay, but, and that, like you said, that's available to us now, so.
It is. Actually, you could pick up that information as a comparison. Anybody can by going into that database.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and I too would like a copy when that's available.
Sure.
Just a couple quick questions here. Are you seeing that the external research that you all are doing coming out of a pandemic, do you feel like that's still accurate right now? Because it seems like the market's all over the place and multiple things.
Okay. Yeah, good question. So when we were going through the last year, when we were going through the pandemic, the market softened from the standpoint of what you would see in pay increases, employee pay increases. We were running at about 3%, a little over 3% just prior to the pandemic. And then the market softened down to about 2.5% for average adjustments in pay. And now we're surfacing back up to about 3% on the average when you bring all entities together and what they're wanting to adjust in pay, whether it's a COLA or a merit adjustment or a general increase, that's working its way back up to 3% again.
Okay, thank you. And then Joe, can I ask you a question? So I guess we talked about what employees would fall under this because there's a lot that won't.
Correct.
So how many current employees would this study cover?
We have, Mr. Johansson and I talked, we have about 60 to 70 job titles. That's kind of how they start with job titles. So I believe 103 total of employees. That's including everyone except for the clerk, the jail, and the fire. I mean, and the sheriff. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I'm assuming, have you put a presentation as far as money, what this might cost the county?
No, not at this point, because it's based on providing the job titles, as Joe mentioned, because we'll base it off of a fee per job title.
I was going to ask him at the end if he would send us an RFP.
Okay, yeah. And thank you. And then, so when you're doing your research to bring all this information together, the one thing I guess that this compensation committee talked a lot about was our organization CAECO with their study. Do you use that in your research also?
Say it again. What the research with other organizations?
Right. Our statewide organization that we kind of fall under is called CAECO.
Okay.
They do their own study as far as the counties alone.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you. Okay. I got it.
So I didn't know if you use that information in your research or not.
Yes. And if we typically do what we do here within the state of Arkansas, the Arkansas Association of Counties puts together an annual pay study report, and pretty detailed because it's down to the actual, not the employee name, but the position and pay for each of the counties by title, by department. And we can access that data to use it for, here we have like class 7 county, class 6 county, class 5 based on population. And we can benchmark the counties that you would like for us to target through that published source for pay comparisons for other counties. So in Arkansas, let's say we're doing a class 6 county, Sebastian County down in Fort Smith, we'll probably benchmark 4 or 5 other class 6 counties as part of the study. We'll roll that to an average so that it doesn't become overweighted with county data. So we'll take 4 or 5 counties data, make that an average for class 6 counties, and then pull in 3 or 4 municipalities, some private sector data, and so on.
Okay, thank you. I'll let somebody else go.
One of our biggest negativities with our compensation plan is there's no room to move. Once you're in it,
Right.
That's just, you're categorized in that position and there's no upward movement.
Right. Okay.
So would yours allow, look at that and see how that could be worked out?
So, Judge, that's a good question from the standpoint of every organization would like to see some movement if it's reasonable, practical. When we see that happen, it's usually because there's enough of a distinction between, let's say, a machine operator 1 compared to a machine operator 2, that we can determine the value of those two. And there's enough difference in either the equipment they're using or the on some positions, maybe the difference of the knowledge they have to have on the computer that they're working with. But for those types of positions where we have levels, we have to make sure that there's enough of a distinction between 1, 2, or A and B to make sure that we can validate, excuse me, the need for that distinction.
Well, that's interesting because when you get off, we're going to talk about a couple of positions that are kind of stuck in, miscategorized, as well as or way under or underpaid as well. And
Okay.
and with one of them, we're talking about moving the classification as administrative assistant to office manager. So
Okay.
so you all do see those types of issues and look at that and try to come up with something that would be helpful in that way too.
Yeah, so that's a good example of one where we see some migration. So let's say, for example, for some of the organizations, they might have an administrative assistant 1 and an administrative assistant 2, and maybe a third level office manager. What makes the distinction between a 1 and a 2 typically is how much authority the elected official of the department is giving that administrative assistant from the standpoint of either maybe some level of supervision for other clerical folks within the department, budget planning, making decisions about purchasing. So we can make a distinction between administrative assistant 1 and 2, and then an office manager typically moves into supervision and authority on behalf of the whole department support staff. So yes, that's where we can make distinctions and validate the need for the position and validate the value difference between a 1, 2 and an office manager.
And you, as part of this proposal or as part of your work, would you define the quantifiers that would allow someone to move from X to Y?
Yeah, yes, definitely. That's correct. And that would be built in the job description and would help validate the reasoning for there being a distinction in the position or not.
Okay. John Mitchell, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good right now. No.
Chief, do you have a question?
I think we're good right now, Judge.
Okay, Betty?
I just want to say that I was very, very excited when I heard the presentation, and I also did the references on the Hansen Group. And I gave Mr. Johansson some history. And since I started at the county in 2012, there was no type of comp plan whatsoever. And in my opinion, it's been a challenge since I've been here almost 9 years.
Mhm.
And also too, there was 2 individuals that tried to come up with the comp plan in 2015. And as Mr. Johansson, he can explain this too, that wasn't really a good idea because it's independent. We need someone independent. We don't need HR deciding on who's a 2H, 3H, or 4H, in my opinion. I'm really excited about this because it could be an opportunity for the county to have a thorough research of all the titles. And so I just want to say, I really hope that our committee realizes how important this can be for our county moving forward so we can stay competitive, because we are losing employees to surrounding counties. And I'm just very excited about it.
Okay, Tamara, you have anything?
I do not.
Mr. Johansson, so on behalf of the Fiscal Court, would you be willing to send us a proposal on what you could provide, how you would do it, and then how your prices would, the cost would work? into
Yes,
that
yes,
proposal?
sir. Yes, we sure can. Definitely.
Is that okay by the compensation committee?
I don't think it'll hurt. Yeah.
You okay with that? You
It'd
okay
give
with
us
that?
something to look
Yeah.
at, but I think, we spent a lot of time waiting on the CAECO study. That study's 2 years old. It's already done a lot of the county information. Contacting KLC, we could get municipality information where we could kind of look at, like we talked about a little bit, apples to apples. Mr. Johansson, I did want to ask you a question about, you mentioned the national group when we were talking about USDOL, and you said that so quickly I couldn't write it down. It was Saunders or something like that. I apologize. I just couldn't
Okay.
write it down as quickly as you said it.
Yes.
I wanted
Okay,
to do a
sorry.
little research on that. That's okay.
You bet. So look up salary.com.
It's salary.com.
Yeah, like pay salary.
Got it. Okay. Thank
Sometimes
you.
I say celery, but no, salary. So
I just didn't catch it appropriately, and I apologize.
But their product is called Comp Analyst. And so it's under the umbrella of salary.com. And actually you can go online and look that up and look for a salary. They'll pop up some information that's not as detailed as what we have because we have a subscription to their product. But you actually can go online and at a particular job title and a market, and they'll come up with an average.
It will give us some basic data, but unless you have a membership or subscription, I guess, like you said, with salary.com, we won't be able to kind of do very thorough research about that.
That's true. That was going to be pretty overall average, whereas we can drill in based on more detailed information, and it gives us a more accurate value as opposed to what's out on the online.
Okay, well, that'll give me a place to start. I appreciate that. Is it you said it was a national group. Are they made up of like individuals who would be part of SHRM, or what kind of is the makeup of this?
You bet. It's what we call a national salary aggregator, and they're out of Boston, this particular company. There's some others that are out there. There used to be Comp Data out of Kansas, but salary.com acquired Comp Data and has brought their database in with their national database. There's another agency or organization called PayScale, and they do the same thing where they aggregate pay data across the country. Now, some of them will aggregate company or organization information. PayScale actually does both company, and they allow individuals to tell PayScale what they make. And so what we say in that particular aggregator is that they're allowing employees who may want to inflate the value because they're looking for a job. And so we typically like to work with salary.com's data because it's company originated, organization originated. And so it has a little bit valid. We feel better about the validity of their data because they're not allowing employees to enter in their own individual salaries.
And so that salary.com data should align itself with USDOL because the company, again, like we talked, they have to report. And if they report inaccurately, they are subject to federal penalties for doing so.
That's correct. So right. That information is coming from both the public and private sector, all organizations that are paying taxes. So that's why we feel like it's a really valid report. Salary.com probably picks up a little bit more of the private sector from a weighting standpoint. And that's why we like to use their data on top of the DOL data, because we feel like we get a little bit more private sector weighting.
How frequently does data feed into salary.com? Is it every quarter? Is it seasonally adjusted? Just to get a sense of how that does line up.
You bet. So our understanding with SAR.com is that that's a constant process, that their algorithms are bringing in data and updating data on a day-to-day basis based on data that's coming into their system. And so as opposed to DOL being a year off, Salarycom is on a day-to-day basis being updated.
So how constantly, I guess, how quickly do they refresh data? I mean, do they refresh it?
Yeah, so that's why I think they have data sources that are coming in daily, and those are being added to the overall database. And so my understanding is every time that data is coming in, it's being refreshed. Now, whether they have a midnight time frame or a particular time frame throughout the week, I'm not sure, but we have a pretty good feel that that data is current from the standpoint of compared to other data sources based on the data that's coming into their overall database.
Okay, and the salary.com, they take in private institutions and they also receive information from maybe municipalities or other governmental entities or quasi-governmental entities, or is it primarily private?
No, based on our research, it's both public and private.
Okay.
Mr. Johansson, that a lot of information, as Squire Sebastian is asking you about up-to-date salaries and all that.
Right.
In your opinion, and I know this is somewhat biased, but we do need to hear this. Is it better for an entity to do a compensation plan within itself by its own people, or is it better to do it from an independent standpoint, someone else looking at the plan itself and designing the plan?
From our experience in working with both counties, cities, banks, educational institutions, we've found that when we're involved with it, we don't know the individuals in the organization. We're coming in from the outside and we're strictly looking at the job description. We're valuing it against our system. Every job gets evaluated against the same system. So from a validity perspective and from the perspective of not having any favoritism because we're not aware of the organization, we've found that we've been accepted as long as we're introducing the process, explaining the process, and allowing people to feel good about the process before it becomes something that drives your new pay structure. So from that standpoint, we've felt and found that people have found us to be objective, and it's been accepted by the employees better than what happens if you drive that internally. Because internally, there's some concern that it's going to get weighted for one department as opposed to another department, just because people have a history with the organization where we don't have a history with the organization.
Squire Muller?
Thank you, Judge. Just one more question. I'm just kind of curious as you talk here. So what happens, because you're just looking at the positions, not the employees, which is always a good thing.
Right.
What happens if you come across an employee that is in a too high of a classification for what their job title is? I mean, does that make sense?
It does. And that happens sometimes when an employee gets promoted into a higher position and then they were not successful in that position and they go back to a lower position, but the organization did not change the pay for that employee. And so our system's going to identify the individuals that may have occurred to them, because they'll typically be in what we call the fourth quartile or over the max of the pay range for the position they're currently in. And so we do find either employees where that's happened to them or employees that have been with the organization 20 years in the same position, and they're out in the fourth quartile or over the max on the range.
So what do you do in that case? I mean, obviously you can't take pay away from them legally, I don't believe. So what happens to that individual?
Yeah, so you have different options. One is to cap pay. So you cap their pay or redline their pay until the range catches up. With range adjustments every 2 to 3 years, the range will eventually catch up with them. Some organizations, if they cap it or redline them, they might give them a one-time 2% COLA bonus and not add it to their base pay, but just give them a bonus so that they're not perpetuating their pay above the maximum of the range. So there's some different ways to handle folks that have reached the top of the chart.
Okay, thank you.
And you said that would be they have occasionally given a one-time COLA, but it was not.
Not added to their base.
If it was across, right, added to the base. And I think that seems to be something that Squire Moore has mentioned a couple of times. So when you come in, when your firm comes in, is this akin to like a desk audit? Would you sit down with each individual? Let me call them staff resources at this point, I guess. Would you sit down with each staff resource and audit the type of work that they do? Then would you work with their immediate supervisor, the staff resource, to say, what are the expectations for the position? I'm trying to figure out, because when you talk to a person, they're a staff resource, they may perceive that they are either doing more or doing less for the organization than when you talk to the supervisor. And it could be either way. I mean, it's definitely not one thing. I'm sure you've ran across that in your history since 1973. So.
Right. Yes. So the process is to make sure that the job description is current and that it reflects the purpose and the duties for the position. And that process typically occurs with the supervisor, department head, who are working with the employees in their department to make sure they have input from the employees that are in the position and that they're quantifying the expectation for that position and what are the education requirements, what's the experience requirements. We have a questionnaire that we use to drive that process. If you have current job descriptions that you feel good about their format and content, those migrate into our software database on a per title basis and become the basis for making sure that the job description is current and the ability for us to value the job against the 15 factors. So based on your comment, it would be important for the supervisor and department head elected official to make sure that they're getting input from the employees to make sure that that job description is current.
Okay, so what would happen is that, and maybe you could walk us through that process. So you have a survey tool, then that survey tool comes to a supervisor. The supervisor then sits with the staff resource to perform that kind of function. So that is again back on the staff here to adequately do that. And then once they have the survey tool complete, then they send that to you and it gets uploaded to a software, and then whatever through some type of process, that software through algorithms, protected data, whatever it might be, they factor that against the marketplace. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. This is the way I'm understanding what you
Sure,
said,
you bet.
how it steps out. So far, am I on target or not?
You're great question. So I've got a question, Betty Jo, on the job descriptions. Do you think that they're in a current status, or would this process be helping to bring them a little more current than where they are now?
It's about 50%, I would say. We've been working on those in the last 2 years of getting their current, because they haven't been looked at in 10, 15 years because there wasn't any HR. So it's almost like 50% now current.
Okay.
The others we would have to work on.
So what we would do is take your current descriptions in a Word document format, and those would migrate into our database on a per title basis in what we call a position analysis questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, you have your heading information for a job description, you have a general purpose statement, and then duties. And then beyond that, You have our 15 compensable factors would be education. Well, just going back, let's see if we can go back up. So right here, the factors are listed on the screen up at the top. So basically what we would be doing is after the description is brought current, then we would be using those 15 factors to evaluate each position against the 15 factors. The endpoint is having a current description that's reflective of the job that both the employee, supervisor, department head, elected official feel good about.
Your screen's not shared, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Your screen's not shared.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well,
So-
we do understand the concept, so he's going to send that to us so we know what.
Right. And then,
It's hard to see him anyway from this, from this far away.
For once.
You've got
Lambert's chair-
glasses, so I don't even
Lambert's
have
chair
a-
pays off today.
My glasses won't even help
Yeah.
me see that.
Screen.
so that's not pulling back up to the main screen now, but the key to this process is that when we finish our work on the job description through the questionnaire and it's reviewed by the supervisor, department head, elected official, then that's when we can go through the process of evaluating each of the jobs against the 15 factors.
Mr. Johansson, let me ask this, because one of the things that we have talked about in the past is that our positions here do not have, and I'll use these terms interchangeably, and perhaps the marketplace is not doing that, steps or grades within a position category. So for example, if you had our road supervisors here. So if you had a heavy equipment operator, you have a light equipment operator, which you're going to allow them maybe to use a mower. You may allow them to use a roller, and you may allow them to use chainsaw or
Right.
weed eater. Okay. Now,
Right.
when they step up to, and so you may have different grades of that. So light equipment operator, they may start out on a weed eater and a chainsaw as a grade 1 light equipment operator. And then to move to grade 2, they would have to have some equipment operating experience to maybe use a skid steer and then a roller, because they don't have as many movable parts as some other equipment. And then there's only 2 or maybe 3 steps or 3 grades within light equipment operator. And then to be able to transition into heavy equipment operator, then
Right.
you would actually be able to read blueprints, which would be step 1. And you'd be able to maybe shoot grade and blueprint reading and operate like a mini or a micro track hoe. You
Right.
would move them up, and then step 2, you would move them into a backhoe or a grader.
Right.
Which doesn't have as many movable parts. And then, I'm just trying to figure out, how are you thinking that there are going to be steps and grades involved in these? Because that's something we've talked about from, at least since I've been on the court,
Right.
saying that is what is going to distinguish the staff resource in the position, not because you've been there a long time. It's
Right.
because of the talent, skill, and ability that you are applying on behalf of the county and the citizens of the county every day.
Right. So typically we work with grades and not steps. Now, steps typically show up with, let's say, uniform positions, police and fire, because historically that's been kind of their nature to have position title and steps. But for the county in general, we would recommend grades and ranges. And so kind of going back to your example of the different equipment operators, let's say your light equipment operator might have a lower amount of general experience required, a little bit less skill education training, and on machine and computer operations, they're not working with as complex or as dangerous equipment, or equipment that would have as great a value. So your heavy equipment operator, or maybe your level 2 equipment operator, maybe a little more experience, a little bit, excuse me, higher value on the equipment that they're working with and the nature of the equipment that they're working with from the standpoint of what knowledge it takes to operate that equipment. And so that's where the 15 factors help us make a distinction between a light equipment operator, a senior equipment operator from the standpoint if we have different levels, or a heavy equipment operator.
You have any other questions, Squire?
I probably will as I think about it a little bit more. I wasn't sure what he
Well-
was presenting on today, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We're going,
Thank you.
we're going to have him to send a proposal, and that when we receive that, we can bring him back and have other questions as well. This is just the first phase of talking about a process that, as we all know, is needed. So if you will do that, Mr. Johansson, I thank you for your presentation today. If you will send Betty Jo a proposal on how and what you all would be doing, and how you would determine the cost from that standpoint. We will look at that, and we'll get back with you and see what we can come up with and how we can, if possible, work things out with you. Okay?
You bet. Thank you, County Judge, Betty Jo, and members of the court. Appreciate it.
Okay, we appreciate you. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
You too. And now we go right into what we've been trying to, first of all, we have one position, and then the second part of it will be something we've been looking at for several months, years really too, administrative assistance. This first item is a crime victim advocate, and that there is a classification and a possible salary increase. And on the line, I think, is Sky Hansen. Sky, are you here? Andrew, can you get Sky in if she's here?
I'm here, Judge.
I think I hear her. Sky? There you go. Hey, Sky. Good
I'm here.
morning.
morning.
Thank you for being on. Betty, would you talk about the classification part of, the reclassification part of where she is and what you're suggesting she should be moved to?
Yes, back in, again, when we created the positions in 2015, the crime victim advocate position was classified incorrectly. It was classified as clerical. I was overruled on that. So it was stayed at a 2H. I believe it should have been at a 4H, but again, the committee and decided it was a clerical position. So I'm on the stance that it's been incorrectly ever since we created a comp plan. So if you're looking at the current grades of the positions, in my opinion, by reading even her job description, and she requires a bachelor's degree, it should at least be a 4H position.
Okay,
That's a little history behind how it became a 2H.
you're recommending that it go from 2H to 4H? Is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and do 4H positions require degrees?
yes, bachelor's degree. Most 4H positions require, not all, I'm sorry, let me correct,
Okay,
not
how many
all
years
positions.
How many years of experience does it require?
Currently on the job description, and I'm not for sure, Sky, if it's outdated or not. She would have to get with me on that, and the county attorney and the Commonwealth attorney. I would like for them to review that job description, but currently it's 2 years of experience working in the human services field or court system, requiring professional contact with the victim. So
Okay,
I don't know if it's outdated or not. Since I've been here, it's not been updated. I'll
okay.
have to ask Ms.
Sky,
Sky.
for Squire Sebastian and Squire Muller's purposes, would you briefly review your job and what you do? And we have the letter here.
Yeah.
Do you all want that? I know, Squire Muller, I'm sorry, but I think we all let her
Oh, I'm fine.
speak. Okay.
No, I just asked.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
make sure.
okay. If I have to, I'll go Zoom on my phone.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I think that Well, here comes Mr. Cleveland. I'm sorry. He just finished grand jury and he just joined us.
Okay.
They're asking me for a description of what I
Well,
do.
maybe Mr. Cleveland could do that and let you, Mr. Cleveland.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're looking at two pieces of two possible changes in Sky's job reclassification and pay as well.
Okay.
We're talking about reclassifying her and what the 2H position, Betty, what is the difference between a 2H and a 4H?
A 2H position is which require easily acquired skills. Examples would be secretary positions that require typing and similar skills. 4H positions which require specialized skills such as computer operators, moderate programmers, foremen, building and electrical. Those are just examples.
Okay. You do agree that she's not just a clerical secretary?
Right. Her job is actually very unique, and it's become even more unique with the passage of this Marcy's Law, because she has to maintain constant contact with victims in these cases, get input from them, make sure they're notified of all court proceedings, explain the nature of the court proceedings to them, discuss with them possible dispositions of cases and the ramifications of those dispositions, everything that would be involved in that particular disposition of a case, all the way from a cold check to a homicide. So it's almost an indescribable position at this point.
So unique.
Very unique.
Okay. All right. And Betty, let's go Sky again. Sky, do you want to elaborate any more on that, or and about what you do on a day-to-day basis and how it's different than just a clerical position?
Sure. Betty Jo asked if I thought that the job description out there, and I think it certainly is. I almost didn't apply for this position because the job description really doesn't explain what it does at all. Also, I think it should be noted that when I applied for this position, I was hired only to be the advocate for Mr. Cleveland, and I absorbed the position that was previously under Mr. Sparks. So there used to be two positions, and now there's just one because I do both. So I cover all three courts. I cover circuit court, I cover district court, and family court. So I'm actually the only one in the state of Kentucky that does that. So it's hard to compare me to pretty much anybody in the state, because VOCA has, whenever I tried to reach out to them to look for a comparison, there's nobody else in the state that does that. So.
Go ahead, Squire.
I'm just curious, and thanks for being here. And Mr. Cleveland, I'm just curious, why does this position fall under the fiscal court and not, obviously we have letters here from the judges and yourself. I'm just curious why it falls under our place here.
Well, I guess it fell into your bailiwick as a matter of default. I've gone to the Prosecutor's Advisory Council over and over and over again seeking funding for this position, and they always say, no, we don't have the money to fund that position. So years ago and before my time, it was funded by the fiscal court and has continued to be, even though I've made efforts to try to get some assistance from the Prosecutor's Advisory Council so that the fiscal court wasn't picking up the entire tab.
And it's a VOCA grant, which means that it's a match grant, and fiscal court's only responsible for 20%.
Okay, thank you.
Sky, if you're on vacation or if you're sick, who covers for you? Does someone else contact the victims to get them through the court proceedings, or how is that filled?
I carry my work phone and I do my job when I'm on vacation because there's nobody else that covers in my absence.
Okay. And Scott or Mr. Cleveland, you are Sky supervisor, is that correct? Or is Rick Sparks her super?
as much as I supervise anybody, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, if I tell her, look, I need you to cut this person. And, but, you know, she's been doing this job so long, she thinks ahead of me and she does it before I even tell her to. So it's, you know, I rely on her so much at this point in time that she just does the job without even telling her what she needs to do.
Do you do an evaluation of her? No.
Well, if anybody ever asked me to, I do, but I don't
Okay.
know that anybody's ever, other than once or twice, ever asked me to do that.
If there was one to be done, you would be the
I
one to
would do it. Sure, I'd do it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
expect Rick Sparks would also have input onto that.
Okay. All right. Would you agree that she should be reclassified then?
Yes,
And you do sign her timesheet?
yes.
Okay, so that's okay. So let's start with step one. If you've heard the case for reclassification, is there a motion to
Can I ask
reclassify?
Betty Jo a question?
You sure?
Why are we skipping over 3H?
That's not, with the other positions that we have, it's not equivalent. So it should be a 4H in my opinion.
I guess,
Well,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I pulled out the job description, and the minimum qualifications require a bachelor's degree in social work, sociology, psychology, guidance counseling, or a high school diploma and 4 years of related experience. So, you know, in looking at these documents that talk about 2H, 3H, et cetera, you know, and it seems like not necessarily the primary duties aren't really what is the issue at hand. Seems like I guess the issue at hand is the classification, which is the 2H. So I guess for me, I can see based on what is listed here for 3H, positions which require specific skills. And in this position description, primary duties, you know, there are a lot of specific skills that are required. You know, advocating, and there are a lot of examples of that in the support letters. Words like advocating for, you know, countless victims, relationships built within the justice community. Those things align with some of the primary duties here about the needs assessment, well-established network of services and referring, works as a liaison. There are other words in here like assists not only the victims of the crime, but support law enforcement, which sounds like that is very critical, local prosecutors, the courts in Franklin County. So of course that, you know, would align here with this provide system-wide services to improve overall response to the community and the criminal justice system. I had to highlight some of this stuff and make notes on it. But I guess the key thing really for me is the 3H position requires specific skills, and those are acquired through specialized training or extensive experience. And that's the words I think that Betty Jo used. So in my mind, this kind of falls more in line with the primary duties of the position: crisis counseling, needs assessment, making referrals for victims, working as a liaison between the court systems, which we've heard, notifying the victim of their case status. That was mentioned not only verbally today, but in the documents. You know, the position, I don't think we're looking at the person. I think one of the key things we heard from the Hansen Group is we need to look at what these positions are doing for the community. And it's not necessarily, we are excited about what these people are bringing to it, but we also have to design these positions because no one person is going to hold that position indefinitely. We're going to have somebody else come after that. And we want to make sure we recruit from a broad range of candidates for these jobs. And if we are so narrowly defining now positions, we may not, we've already heard today, the market's tough. So I throw that out there based on what I'm reading in here about specific acquired skills through specialized training.
Betty, do you have the description of a 3H position?
Mhm.
And do you have the description of the 4H position?
Yes.
Would you read the 3H out loud?
3H, position which require specific skills acquired through specialized training or extensive experience operating complicated equipment. Examples would be mechanics, road operators, employees that require bookkeeping type skills.
Okay.
A 4H is positions which require specialized skills such as computer operators with the ability to do modern programming, road foreman, examples, building and electrical inspectors.
So I don't think they're all encompassing because it doesn't take into account of everything that would fall within those. So I think the keywords that we're looking at is not the examples, but the wording, the
Right,
positions that
exactly.
require specific skills. And that's what I was saying, Judge, I'm trying to get to your point about the word, not necessarily examples, because there could be probably 40 examples under each one, which would make it really tough.
Squire Muller.
Well, I guess where I'm at too is we just spent the last hour, and this is nothing against Sky. I think she does a wonderful job, but we just talked about, we're in the whole process of redoing job descriptions, job, everything at this point. So I'm not sure. I think we can all sit here and agree that she does a wonderful job, but I think we're also in the beginning stages of finally attacking the thing that we haven't done, as far as job descriptions, classifications for the whole county. So I don't know.
Here's the thing, guys. This was done in error. This is an error. You've got to agree this is not a 2H. I mean, by reading the job description and I was part of this compensation committee back 7 years ago.
Yeah, what was done in the
I know
past,
the
we have
behind the
to,
scenes of this, what happened. So my point is, she is classified incorrectly from the get-go of a 2H. I'm not gonna argue 3H, 4H, 5H, but just by looking at what we currently have, okay, of the 3H positions, I'm just looking at the current positions and what, say, administrative assistant in judge's office, okay, is a 3H. I don't believe crime victim advocate is administrative position. So that's why I said 4H. Okay.
But the thing is here, looking at these words, it doesn't specify administrative tasks only in 3H. I didn't see the wording about specifically administrative tasks because it's very clear from these letters. One from the crimes victim advocate herself, about these are the kind of things that I do, which are certainly very specialized skills or specific skills, which are listed in the position description. So I'm trying to get at that too, because I would agree. I flat out said, I don't think it's 2H. I'm pro-offering the 3H based on what I see in front of me. And again, we've talked about, there's no exhaustive lists of examples of job duties or positions there. It's based on what we have in the code that talks about the very specific skills that are acquired. They're not easily acquired as they are in 2H. It's very clear. This individual has had a long history of performing work in the court system. So they are specific skills. I wouldn't have them. They are specific skills that are acquired through a period of time. So
Betty,
I'm agreeing with that.
are there any other positions that are 4H that take this similar type qualities that Sky does in her work? Are there any other positions that are somewhat comparable that are classified 4H? Okay,
I can't
and I know, and
because
see,
that's a
exactly
unique
what
position.
that's what Johansson said that you can't do.
Right.
But we're sitting here arguing over
I can
whether
tell
it's
you
a
who's
3H or a 4H, and you're recommending 4H, and we're arguing whether it should over that. And I'm just trying to get. I agree it's a 4H, and you all are. It's up to you. So we can go forever, but if we agree that it needs to be changed, Squire Sebastian, do you have a motion to recommend a change?
I do, and I said from the get-go, I think 2H is incorrect. But based on the reading of the material in front of me and all the support letters, I guess where I'm at, I see this as a 3H regarding specific skills. Certainly, I don't know that that gets to the level of what someone else is inquiring about today, but based on what I see in front of me, that's where I would be. So I would make that motion.
Judge, I would also go 3H, and just remember that we're getting ready to do this for the
That's
whole
the
county.
point.
So there's nothing to say that they come back and say she's a 4H.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of where I am, just where I'm looking at it today.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, I
have to leave.
feel,
I'm gonna go on Zoom.
yeah. And the thing is, I feel moved. I would agree. I think to everyone's point that this is not where it needs to be. But until we see what we're going to get back, I don't know where it really needs to go. But I definitely want to make it a step and advance this because I see very specific skills being used to help people in our county.
Okay, so I still think it should be a 4H, so, but the vote is 2-1. So it will, the compensation committee will recommend that on a vote of 2-1 to be a 3H, not a 4H. The second part is a as part of the reclassification, the salary, and the salary range for a 3H is 33,103 and up to right at 50,000. And because of that, because of the classification range, you are in the, what do you, can you mention, well, I don't know, we shouldn't mention salary. So let's not do that. Let's see. So I would propose, and I think we're going to have to wait for Squire Muller to come back on, but I would propose that we all see that what the work she does and what she's doing, it deserves better pay. And so okay, I see that. And so when you look at other people in the 3H range, she's under several people that she has the same amount of experience, plus her job is different. So I would propose that we increase her salary $3,000 to equal the other people that are under that and are in her office that or not actually in her office, but are part of the people that she works with. And that would be the people that are in the county attorney's office. But that's my proposal. And I'll wait till Squire Muller gets back on and then share. If you want to, Squire Sebastian, you can go ahead and comment.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Hang on, I got to pull those other charts up. Like our HR director said, there's lots of papers up here. So 3H, would that keep this position within the range to do that? Because I think that's the key thing. We want to do that, but I think we want to reward the demonstrated activity here to meet those specific skills that are required. And so I understand that part of this is paid by a grant. So by increasing the salary range, does that increase the grant request automatically, or is all that directly come from court? I don't understand that. And that,
Mr. Cleveland, can you answer that question?
The next grant request would include the increased salary.
okay, and is that made on an annual basis, or is
Federal.
that made
Federal fiscal.
federal? So it would go prior to that October, right? And so it would be, and so it would be the county portion of that amount that was discussed would be only 20%. I'm just trying to make sure.
When you get, do you know, Sky, how it, with raises, any increase in salary that you get is the county proportion still 20%, or is it the total office value and then 20% of that?
We already had to submit our grant for this upcoming fiscal year. It starts in October. So, I mean, if I am granted a raise at this point, I guess it's determined.
It would be on the county.
Have to pay anything additional unless it's said that it's not until the next year.
Is there an opportunity? Typically, there are opportunities to amend grants. I'm only
We
asking.
could do again and ask for an adjustment, I suppose.
Okay.
But that's a better question for Ann, but I think that could be done if it was, we'd have to just move money around and see if that's a possibility.
Okay.
I always have to ask for travel and travel expenses and things like that, but I don't ever use it because I do local training.
What do you budget every year for travel? Because I know we budget for it and you never spend it.
I don't know exactly what it is, but it's required that I ask for it, but I never use it. So
I was thinking it was around 2,000.
I think it is about 2,000.
To answer Sherry Sebastian's question, it would still be within that range. She would not go over that
Yeah,
range.
I saw everybody nodding
Okay.
when I asked the question.
Squire Muller, are you on yet? Andrew, has Squire Muller on?
Yes, he's with us, Judge.
Okay.
Okay.
To take to the court. I mean,
Okay.
if you're making that as a motion, I will second that motion.
Okay, all
Gladly.
right. Squire Muller, we have a motion and a second to take to the court, actually to go through and Northcutt to revise. How would that be done?
We can
We'll
go
get
ahead and
with
take it
her.
to court and get approval, and then Ann can work on it from there to see if she can adjust it. But and if not, Sky's got $2,000 that she never uses.
Yeah, the key
so we
thing
can just
is,
transfer it.
you know, what we would like, I guess what we would like to see, if there is an opportunity to request more federal funds, certainly we would like to, because that way we can ensure that, you know, we're utilizing county money to the best of our abilities. However, if the GAN is not an opportunity and we have to put $3,000 more in from the county budget, we can do that.
Okay.
I mean, that's where I would be. Judge, how about you? What do you
I'm
think?
fine with that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm making a motion, so I'm fine with it.
I'm
So,
just,
She seconded the motion, so.
she sure did. So I think that's.
Squire
good.
Muller, do you understand the motion?
Could you repeat it one more time, please?
Okay. To bring her up with the other people that are in, not the same, but are a part in the office that she's in, I'm recommending that she receive a $3,000 increment as part of the reclassification change. And that keeps her still within the classification amount for that range. And Squire Sebastian seconded.
And what we talked about was ensuring that our grants administrator touches base to send in when we get the GAN, which is a grant award notice, if there is an opportunity between now and the end of the federal fiscal year to amend the submitted grant to see if there's additional funds that we could utilize for salary. But if not, you know, the court just cover the entire 3,000.
Yes, Judge, I'm good.
Okay. Sky, we appreciate what you do. Mr. Cleveland, thank you for coming on today and explaining what she does. We appreciate that. And Sky, we appreciate your work. You're outstanding. And I know that's not a lot of money, but hopefully that will be helpful to you as a start to moving forward. And as the squires have said, we've been on an extensive discussion this morning about changing the classifications and working on salaries too. But this is a good segue into that. So we have a motion and a second, and actually it's unanimous to move forward and work on getting you a $3,000 raise and also a classification change. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And that concludes this piece of the agenda. Now we go to the next item on the agenda. That's administrative assistance. We have we have John Mitchell and Chief Hutcherson on to talk about administrative assistance. As you all heard, obviously administrative assistance, there's there are some issues, and we've been looking at this for at least 6 months, but probably more than a year or so, and what to do with administrative assistants. So I open the floor to you, Chief, or John, to talk about what your thoughts are. John, you want to go first? Nope. Chief, you want to go first?
I'll go first, Judge. I too was around when this classification system was made up, and I expressed my disagreement with the classifications of our administrative assistants. I think they're much more than a 2H. I think 3H definitely is more in their realm of their job responsibilities and duties. And, but of course I was overruled on that, but I still believe that 3H is more of a accurate depiction of their work that they do.
Okay, how many administrative assistants do you have, Chief?
Judge, I just have one.
Okay, and John, do you have one?
Yes.
Okay, Robert, are you on? Robert Hewitt?
Yes, sir.
All right, do you have an administrative assistant as well?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, so Betty, how many administrative assistants do we have that are misclassified?
That are misclassified?
Uh-huh.
4.
We have four.
Yes.
So there's 3.
The fire, friend of court, planning and zoning, and the road.
Okay, planning and zoning. Okay, the fire, planning and zoning.
Friend of the court.
Friend of the court. Okay, friend of the court. Okay. All right. All right. So those, do you recommend that they be reclassified to 3H?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That was, I will agree with the chief. That happened back in 2016. I disagreed and I was overruled.
Okay. All right. So you all, John, do you want to say anything? Robert, do you all want to say anything about the reclassification of the jobs that they do? Betty, will you once again read the 3H, the 2H, and the 3H classification, just for clarification? Read 2H first.
2H is positions which require easily acquired skills. Examples would be animal control, secretarial positions that require typing or similar skills. 3H, positions which require specific skills acquired through specialized training or extensive experience operating complicated equipment. Examples would be mechanics, road equipment operators, employees that require bookkeeping type skills.
Okay. So bookkeeping is probably the key word in there. John, does your administrative assistant do bookkeeping?
All of our bookkeeping, that's it.
Chief, does your administrative assistant do bookkeeping for you?
Absolutely, Judge. She keeps close tabs on the monies going in, going out, and ensures that during budget time that we're on point.
Robert, does your administrative assistant do bookkeeping for you?
Yes, she does. And her job description also includes the fact that she is the backup to the accounts payable office in the absence of that person.
Okay. Okay. So it's clearly that these are misclassified as well, Betty, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to change their classification from 2H to 3H? Administrative assistants.
Let me ask a couple of questions. So
Sure.
it sounds like they draw heavily upon clerical skills in looking at the materials too, which is keyboarding, data entry, and data entry would be like completing forms or travel or purchase orders or fund reconciliations. Certainly they meet the general public, potentially as the first face that you may see, depending on where they're stationed or located. They're going to relay information, whether it's verbally on the phone or meeting face to face. They're going to perform written communications, which is like, I guess, correspondence, reports, manuals, advertisements, other type of records. They're probably going to perform and maintain document and file management, which would be mails, any kind of voucher, record keeping, files, filing, archiving, that sort of thing. Certainly, I'm assuming that they would schedule appointments and maintain office calendars, probably order and track supplies. Are those the type of things that I'm in looking at all the material, those things kind of rang out from everybody's material that was provided on the type of skills that they perform. Is
Are you
that,
asking the department heads?
yes, yeah, the only one I can see is John.
Well, you can also
It's
ask
the road.
the chief.
Yeah, certainly, it's just a, I guess, question for whomever's on.
John Mitchell.
Well, that's very accurate, I think, put it all in a nutshell. Yeah, it's not just what's written on this piece of paper either, that's for sure. There's a lot more that goes into day-to-day operations in everybody's department, and each department is unique in its own. As the previous crime victim advocate there, that is a very unique position. I understand, you know, like I said, each department runs different, they do different things, they're all different. We have the same set of skill sets, I believe, on the piece of paper. They all work hand in hand, they communicate, you know, it's all there. Everything works great, but this 2H thing is no good at all. That's terrible. That's not what these people need to be classified as. They need to go up to the 3H, and I believe they need to be looked at in the pay scale difference too.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about before, and I think when you had initially come in to talk about the road department, is we had talked about grades and steps. We covered that again earlier today. And we used equipment operator or something as our example, because there certainly is a differentiation in, you know, having somebody drive a single axle dump truck or a single axle truck compared to somebody you're going to turn loose on a track hoe that's going to be digging underground and you don't know what's under there, you know, and how to deal with bud locates and things like that. I know that's not in the realm of administrative assistant, but I also heard Mr. Johansson talk about, I think someone put on here office manager. None of these individuals, do they supervise people? Because he specifically said office managers, and from what I have tried to review, office managers do supervise people within the office. Do any of these supervise folks? Does your, I can ask you because you're here.
No.
Does yours does not. Chief, does your administrative assistant supervise staff at the fire department?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Hewitt, does your administrative assistant, I think you're on too. I'm not seeing you, but I think I heard your voice earlier. Does your administrative assistant supervise personnel?
She helps all of us, so in some form or fashion, she does help keep us all in line. I'm gonna answer yes to that.
That's a nice way of saying no, but yes. And I think Chief Hutchinson and John can say the same thing too.
I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would. Squire Muller, are you still on? Is there any comment you have?
No, thank you. Yes, I'm still on. I was kind of thinking the same thing, because I know I've run into things with our business about trying to make people even from hourly to salary. And there's a lot of stipulations as far as if there's not people working under them, they can't be classified certain ways legally with Department of Labor. That was one of my concerns actually with this. And then I just feel like, you know, we haven't had a compensation meeting in 6 months, and now we're talking about changing 4 people's things when we're looking at researching the entire county's descriptions and everything. I almost feel like I want some more time to kind of digest what's going on. So I don't know if we could schedule another compensation meeting to address this, just so because at least me, so I can get back up to par on where we are with everything. I don't know if that's anybody else feels the same way, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, is there a way for us to pull in the CAECO study? Because we had heard when we started originally talking about this, I know 77 counties participated, so you've got a 65% rate. All the counties that, I can't see that Franklin County is so demonstrably different in the type of positions that we have from our other sister counties.
Well,
And maybe sister community. I'm sorry.
When we looked at, and I thought you all did too, and Betty came back with the report. We discussed it, and it's not really apples to apples because so many administrative assistants are doing part of the treasurer's job. They're doing all kinds of, there's not just a straight up administrative assistant at the fire department job. There's not a straight up administrative assistant at the road department. They do 3 or 4 other jobs, and it became too diluted to say, okay, we need look at this one and look at that one. So I do agree that Hansen Group is the next phase, but that still doesn't cover what they're doing today, just like we did with the VOCA advocate, crime victims advocate. Go ahead, Betty.
I want to say, Judge, 2 years ago when the CAECO study came out, we looked at that, and I thought we decided that we could not use that because they have 10 different titles within one pay grade. They have treasurer in with a payroll clerk. So I'm a little confused. I didn't think that we was could go with CAECO study because there's like 10 different job titles within that class.
Yeah.
So we haven't looked at it again.
Well, I can't say that I've completely walked away from the CAECO study because it's important, there was a lot of effort put into that. It's important for us to look at. And I think, Mr. Johansson talked about utilizing one that had been done by Arkansas. So he knows there are valuable qualities to whatever he can source if we go down that path. To address one of the things the judge said, and I think this is always important for us to know, all of us have, every position has that unqualified other duties as assigned because someone has to perform whatever function comes down the pike. It may not be a specific function that is assigned to X, Y, or Z, a specific staff resource, but in the moment of needing the service, someone has to step in, whether it is the supervisor, another person in the office, whomever it may be. So the thing is not everybody's job is going to be very specific to every type of function, because if our IT coordinator, he could be answering the door today if somebody's gone on lunch and he just happens to be there. It's not in his specific criteria to do that function, but it is sort of like other duties as assigned. He's just going to jump out there and do that because it makes the office function and perform well. So we know that those things happen just across the board.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's hard to quantify that to say X is always going to do this because X may not always be in the office that day and somebody else has to perform that function. I'm just trying to figure out what the happy medium is here because we've talked several times about grades and steps. We used examples today and Mr. Johansson validated that that's really what we need to do to create that separation. I think that Squire Moore has talked about multiple times. Judge, you probably have talked about it. We've all talked about that's the key thing we're trying to do is find that separation to give our employees the opportunity to continue to not only use the training that they've got within the organization, the collaborative approach that they bring to this organization, but to continue to advance. I think that's one of the key things we're looking at is that step grade way to do that. And I know we've talked about it a whole lot.
Betty?
I would want to say on the, I agree with what Sherry Sebastian's talking about with the, like we all do other duties assigned, but here's the difference is when someone is added additional duties and responsibilities, that stays on their plate. That is their job now if they're added additional duties. And unfortunately, we can't give increases for additional duties for our staff, but the sheriff, clerk, and jail can. And so we're trying to, the permanent additional duties, we all do different things time to time, but this is additional duties that's been put upon these employees, and we can't give them an increase, and other entities can.
Understand. Squire Sebastian, where are you? Squire Muller, where are you on reclassification?
Thank you, Judge. I would really appreciate it if maybe we could schedule another compensation meeting and let me dig into this a little bit more, just because it's been 6 months since we talked about this, and we're not just talking about the, an advocate for the court. We're talking about multiple, people. And I understand everybody wants to, try to help their people and give them more money. I just want to make sure I do my homework. So, I personally would like to table it, schedule another compensation meeting, and make a decision there.
Could we schedule that soon? If we could.
Well, I think that we ought to wait until we hear back from Joe Hansen. If we're going to reschedule, you might as well bring Joe Hansen back and talk about their proposal as well. And it shouldn't be that long.
Well, then I think you're onto something there. I would agree with you on that. If we could do that, because I think that, and I keep coming back to that steps and grades. I think that is really important in this process.
Well,
I really do.
If I'm ready to make the decision now. I think the reclassification is an easy one. The salary is a little bit harder, but that's neither here nor there. But if you're wanting to wait, I think we should wait until we hear from Joe Hansen and decide, and then instead of just meeting on this one particular issue, we look at how we move forward. I think moving forward is probably the most important thing that we do when it comes to salaries for our employees, how we handle it moving forward. Okay.
So did you make a motion to go ahead and reclassify 2H to 3H?
Yes, but I didn't get a second.
Do you want to call for a second?
Well, I think they just said they would just soon wait. So
Okay.
I thought I heard that. Okay. Okay. So is there a motion to continue this discussion until the next compensation meeting? Is that the way we should say it, Amber?
Do you all want to go ahead and schedule the next compensation committee meeting?
Well, we're going to wait to make sure we get Johansson's information in.
Because I think the judge has a very valid point. We'd like to see kind of like what the range of services they're going to provide and how, they gave us kind of a general schedule, but if we tell them, we're the drivers of that. When you're the contractor, you're going to push them to do whatever. And I think we all want to look at this.
Betty, are you okay with what we're just saying, bringing them in?
If that's what you all decide on.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to schedule another compensation meeting. This will be an item on the agenda, the reclassification of our administrative assistants and some possible a title change and possible salary increases. Chief, you understand what we're looking at? Chief Hutcherson, you understand?
Yes, Judge, I'm on board with that.
Okay. Mr. Hewitt, you understand?
Yes, sir.
John, you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, is there any other business for the compensation committee? I don't see any. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Okay, and seconded. Squire Muller, you be safe driving, and we'll be in touch as soon as we can. As soon as he gets the information, we're going to have another compensation meeting. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.